Good morning, Phoenix, and welcome to the House of Mystery radio show. This is the place to come for true crime, conspiracy, and alternative history. Only on KFNX 1100 Independent Talk Radio. We're here every Saturday morning, 6 to 7 a.m., and I'm your host, Al Warren.
In the hearts of men. The shadow knows.
Welcome back to the House of Mystery. Today's mystery, the Jodi Arias trial. And joining us is the defense attorney for Jodi Arias and author of Trapped with Miss Arias. It's book 1 of 3, is Kirk Nurmi. Welcome to the show, Mr. Nurmi.
Well, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to talk to you here today.
So, quite a story. When did you find out you were going to be on the case?
Well, I was assigned the case back in about August of 2009. At the time, which is obviously a long time ago, I was working as a public defender in the capital unit. And I kind of tell some of the details in the story in the book, because a lot of people think I chose Miss Arias as a client, that sort of thing, so I could get on TV, things of that nature. But no, the truth of the matter was that it was kind of my turn up, my defense team's turn up on the rotation, so to speak, to get a new case. And Miss Arias' former attorneys had withdrawn, and a file with the name Jodi Arias came on my desk, so to speak.
So now, when you first got the case and saw it, what was your first impression of the case? Well,
when I first was assigned the case, all I knew is that obviously my client was female. And my supervisor at the time had told me that she had partaken in this CBS 48 Hours interview. So I didn't really know much more than that because the whole file hadn't been transferred over from the prior attorney. So I didn't have all the evidence. I didn't have all the facts. And certainly one thing that stuck out to me is the fact that she was female. As a capital defense attorney, you really don't get too many female clients. Even in your career building up to that, and murder cases and things like that, as you might guess, a vast majority, 95, 98% of your clients are male. And so that stood out to me. And then, having someone who had been on TV and having the chance to watch her on TV and realize that she was articulate and well-spoken was also something that stood out to me.
So when you actually met Jodi for the first time, did she live up to what you had thought she was going to be?
Well, I had some suspicions, and I go into the book the reasons why, but, I felt as if, that she was, a little flirtatious, a little, possibly a victim of sexual abuse, so some of those things started formulating in my head. And, ultimately she kind of conformed to that. I tell the story in the book, when I met Jodi Arias, she was just another client, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't what it became in January of 2013 when the cameras were rolling. So it was fairly routine to go visit a new client. But I tell the story in the book about how it was like chit-chatting at Starbucks. as opposed to an attorney meeting a client for the first time. So it was definitely unique in that respect.
So do you think that she never thought she'd ever be tried for it, or was she real casual then?
Well, I think she was very casual, but, it's hard to say, I can't obviously read her mind, so it's hard to say what her motivations for acting a particular way during that initial meeting were.
So now, what made you go into write the book now that it's done?
What made me?
Yeah. Was there something?
Yeah, well, I think there were a lot of reasons. I mean, there was a sensational aspect to the case, and that drew people's attention beginning on January 2nd, 2013. And I wanted to get behind that and help people understand the backstory of what leads up to a case like this, and the truth about why I was Miss Arias' lawyer, things of that nature. Because there were a lot of misconceptions about that. There were a lot of misconceptions about myself and my defense team. So I kind of wanted to clear the air. And going back to that sensationalism and the true reality of the story, this is ultimately a tragedy. I mean, we had this young man this beloved young man who was murdered, and we have a young woman who was struggling through life and finding her way, but who is now spending the rest of her life in prison for killing that beloved young man. And it's a sad tale, and it's a tragic tale, and it's a tale about toxic relationships and the need for us to separate ourselves from those relationships. So, I wrote in part as well with the hope that somebody might really look at this relationship just beyond the sensational aspects and say, there's a lesson to be learned here about both parties, getting away from each other and moving on with their lives. We had not to ramble on, but here recently in Phoenix area, we had a young girl. They were high school girls, and there was a murder-suicide. And these girls hadn't even got out of high school, and at least one of them couldn't find a way to get away from this relationship and move on. And now both of them are dead. And avoiding tragedies like that is something that I hope, maybe even if it's just one that I never know about, my hope is that some of those tragedies will be avoided.
Yeah, it's true. What do you think the sensation was? Like, what pulled this case into such a media spotlight? I mean, back in 2009, you weren't expecting this to be on, all the TV shows and being followed, and it was kind of a CNN all-day event. Yes, it was.
I always say I don't think any one of us could have anticipated, any of the players involved could have anticipated that it became what it became. I mean, there was certainly, ultimately before the opening statements were made, we knew it was going to be covered, we knew it was going to be live streamed, that sort of thing. But it was such a sensationalistic, all-encompassing, you're right, all day on HLN, right? Yeah. All-day coverage of Jodi. And, when people ask me what I think the fascination is, I'm always, I say that I was in the middle of the storm. And so I wasn't part of the watching public, obviously. And so I tend to throw it back and say, what do you think the sensational aspects of it is, which I guess I would pose to you. But, I certainly think, we have elements of sex and members of or parties to this story that some people considered attractive, and they were having sex and forbidden sex, and there was naked pictures, and certainly I think that was part of it, and as time goes on, it definitely sees that for whatever reason, the thirst for information or anything about Miss Arias has not been quenched. Society still seems to have an interest in her and her exploits.
Now, does that change you and the defense team when you're trying to do a job? Now, when there's a lot of media Nancy Grace is sitting in the audience. You've got all this going on. I can't imagine personally. I'd feel like I was being watched and analyzed for every move I made, every word I said. I don't know if being self-conscious, I would be worried about every little thing. Am I wearing the right tie? Because you've got so much comment on it, and it's all day long, and by every show you turn to. Doesn't that affect you personally, and when you're trying to do a job?
Well, I mean, I think to some degree it does, but it's probably in a way that is immeasurable, and that I can't tell you exactly how. I knew I had heard stories that there was, blogs related to the ties I wear. I tend to be a guy who wears colorful ties and socks, and I know that there was commentary on that. And some of that you just laugh off as silly. I'm not going to, change how I dress, but it is a strange feeling. But at the same time, the focus had to be on the job I had to do. When I walked into that courtroom, I wasn't there to serve my interests. I wasn't there to show off my skills for future clients to want to retain me. I wasn't there, so CNN would hire me down the road. I was there to save Miss Arias' life, and that was really, I think, the mission. To the credit of the other members of my defense team, that was the mission all along. And I think by fixating on that, if you will, that at least helped deal with that, what could have been a potential distraction.
Yeah, and I just would imagine I'd feel like I was being analyzed all the time. I'd feel like when you're going for your driver test and you have the instructor in the car, like that's how I would feel. But it's commending that you can do it and did the job. Now, did you actually not want to be on this case? Well,
I tell you, I tell the story in the book about how, towards the end of 2010, I'd had Miss Arias' case for not quite a year and a half at that time, I guess. But I had also been a member of the capital unit of the Public Defender's Office for about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, in that ballpark. And I'd had a couple trials, and I realized, these trials are draining. The shortest one was 3 months. They take away from your personal life. They take away, other potential professional endeavors. They're all encompassing. And I decided, look, this wasn't, doing capital cases wasn't what I wanted to keep doing, what I wanted to keep spending the rest of my career doing. So I decided towards the end of 2010 that I would leave the Public Defender's Office and leave doing capital work and, kind of get into more common areas of practice that I worked in, as sex crimes and other felonies, and kind of just get back to that and go into private practice and help good people who had criminal matters. And, when that happened, I planned on leaving the Public Defender's Office. It was common practice at that time for, new counsel to take over, and not much was really ever said about that. But, the court in this matter had other ideas, and I respect Judge Duncan and her ruling, and in February of 2011, when she made that ruling, or not February, I guess it was ultimately April, proceedings started in February, but when she made that ruling, I respected it, and I had a duty to my client, and my plans for my private practice had to be severely altered, but I went forward and again endeavored to save Miss Arias' life.
So is that where you kind of got the title Trapped with Miss Arias? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Ultimately, that's it. Yeah, I mean, I was trapped, and once April of 2011, that ruling came out. I was trapped, And I kind of tell the story in the book about how I feel like Miss Arias knew that I was trapped, how she kind of threatened me, saying, you know, you're gonna do what I want, and you're gonna strictly handle my case, or, you know, I'm going to, you know, say bad things about you and damage your career. And the one thing about Miss Arias is that she had the ability to do it because she always had the bully pulpit of the media from which to do that, and she did that at certain times at the end of the trial. So, but my fixation again was to focus on saving her life, and everything else had to wait for another day. And that's part of it. And that goes back. Excuse me. That goes back to part of my motivation to writing the book that I probably neglected to bring up earlier, was this idea that I wanted to set the record straight. Miss Arias was going to say these things, and I wanted to make sure that the record was straight.
You know, I have to wonder. Now in the book, you talk a lot what it was like to deal with Miss Arias, and that's without cameras as well. So, is there something in particular that you could tell people, that listeners, that they would get when they're reading the book about that?
Well, you know, they would learn a bit about the process, a bit about the rights of the defendant, a little bit about what areas a defendant has control over and what areas a defense attorney has control over, that sort of thing. And so they would learn a little bit about that interaction. Certainly, I had to restrict the stories I told in the book because of attorney-client privilege, but I tried to speak to as much as I can based on some of the disclosures she has made publicly in her interviews, and some of the things that she did that were just out of bounds, like I say, like the threats to me that I would characterize as being extortion. You know, so those I could come forward with, but I had to be very careful, so I gave everybody as much behind the scenes insight as I could.
And so, how did you take the threats like that from her? Did you think she was quite capable?
Well, you know, under normal circumstances, you might laugh it off, right? Who cares? And nobody's going to listen, that sort of thing. But, you know, Miss Arias she had that bully pulpit. If you're familiar, you know, in between the time that the jury was deliberating her life and during the first trial, she was giving interviews. And so, yeah, she had that microphone, and she had people from both national networks and local affiliates, which would be obviously my primary client base, you know, saying, hey, he didn't do that good a job, and he didn't do this, he didn't do that. And so, yeah, in that sense, she did have the ability to make good on that. So, you know, there's certainly something to that, but again, my duty to Miss Arias was to get past that and save her life. That was my ethical duty, and then, like I say, I deal with that down the road, and that's what I'm doing now.
I see, yeah, because you call this part 1 of 3, so you're going to be doing 2 more books. What direction do you go in for both books?
Well, I tell you, just to give a little backstory, I did not sit down and write with the idea that, first of all, that it was going to become a book. I was kind of writing for myself and kind of processing through some of the things we've talked about here today. But as I began thinking about maybe wanting to come forward with these things, I sat down thinking, I'm going to write one book and get it over with. But it was 5.5 years of my life, and it became, you know, too much. I don't know if you've ever written a book or not, but it became too much for me to conceptualize to how to tell my story. So the first book became the things that happened before trial, and the second book will deal with the things that happened during that first trial. And I'll talk about the witnesses, I'll talk about my thoughts, and on certain witnesses, on certain bits of evidence, that sort of thing. And in my third book, I'll ultimately talk about what happened since that second trial, what happened during the second penalty phase, and I'll give some of my thoughts, my ultimate thoughts on what I believe happened on June 4th, 2008, because it changed from my thinking changed from 2013 to the completion of the trial. And so that's kind of the direction it's going, kind of in the chronological order that the trial went in.
And so, do you think Jodi Arias has read your book yet?
I'm going to guess yes. I have no idea. But I suspect she has. I know she's an avid reader. She has a book club, from my understanding. So.
She's quite intelligent, isn't she? She's quite a bit more than what people thought she was.
Well, there is certainly a complexity to that, and one of the things I describe her as in my book is an intelligent 5-year-old, and that comes with some limitations on that intellect, but. There's no doubt about it. She is an intelligent individual.
And so now this whole trial and these years working on all this, now that's kind of affected your life too, hasn't it?
Well, I think so. I mean, I talk about some of the things in life that you don't necessarily value until you lose them, and one of the things that's most prominent since the cameras turned on, so to speak, on January 2nd, 2013, is my anonymity. Before then, while I had done some high-profile cases, I was never a person that would be, recognized in public or talked about or, as you said, analyzed ad nauseum on cable TV. But when the cameras started running on January 2nd, 2013, that became the case, and my wardrobe, my weight loss between two trials. I remember having the surreal experience between the two trials of sitting and watching a cable news show where they were discussing whether or not I had lap band or gastric bypass surgery, and whether or not I'd gotten hair plugs before. And so, those kind of things are certainly experiences that I wouldn't have had. Had I not been on this case. But so, it certainly affects your life. I mean, I probably wouldn't be talking to you here today if I had not been Miss Arias' lawyer. So there's the good and there's the bad.
Yeah. And has it changed your opinion on the whole justice system? Like, do you feel differently now after than you did before?
Well, I'm still, a big believer in our justice system. I don't think there's any better in the world. And, I'm still philosophically, regardless, not Miss Arias specific, but philosophically against the death penalty, and that's certainly some of what motivated me and guided me through the trial. But, I think what the Arias case does, or what the Arias case will mean moving forward, is it will be the starting point from which other trials that face this kind of high-profile scrutiny, from which they are assessed in the sense that, the courts really haven't had to deal with social media in the way that they had to deal with it in the Arias case. The tweeting, the threats, the live streaming, the Facebook, the effect that it could have on witnesses, the fake reviews of expert witness books that were put on Amazon, and things of that nature. And it becomes so courts are going to have to, when they're confronted with this issue, are going to have to look at the Arias case and say, look what happened here. Do we want this to happen? How does this affect justice? I actually wrote a piece on the New York Daily News a few weeks back talking about the impact of social media, and courts are going to have to answer the question is, what role, if any, does social media play on these trials, and all participants, not only the judge, but the jurors as well? Could they have access to social media? Could they be outed on social media? So there's a lot of impact that the Arias case will have, I think, moving forward on trials.
Do you find that affects you even now? I can't help but think, because I know being in the public eye myself, not like to a trial extent, but don't you? How do I say? Comments, like people will write comments, let's say, on your book, and people will send messages, and I'm sure your law office gets crank calls, as you'd call them. Isn't that all part of that social media? And do you think it's a good thing, or?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that there's that kind of access. People are certainly entitled to their opinions, but they're certainly not. I guess maybe your question is such a hard one to answer, but social media, especially Twitter, tends to come with threats and things of that nature because of the anonymity of the person. And so there's a lot of negative there that comes with Twitter. I've written blogs on my website about cyberbullying and things of that nature. So there's a lot of negative that comes with that sort of attention. I'm not sure if that really addresses your question or not, but it's certainly like an aspect of this whole situation that people feel empowered through some of the social media to reach out and offer their commentary.
Well, I just got to think that it's got to be negative, because there's a lot of people that, not just this case, but any case, when you take on a defense that in the public they've already thought of the person as guilty, so that's in a lot of cases. So all of the people that right away think, okay, Jodi Arias is guilty, and how can you defend someone like that? That's just so wrong. And now with the social media, it's much more direct.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and I think that the closest parallel I can think of is the Casey Anthony trial. But I think, that still occurred at a time when maybe Twitter and Facebook and some of these other things were at least somewhat in their infancy, where all of us I know I didn't have a Twitter account back when Casey Anthony was under trial. But yeah, people, that's part of the misunderstanding, right? That there's this visual of myself or Jose Baez or whomever it is, and which is I guess another ancillary reason why I wrote the book, for people to understand that, look, no criminal defense attorney supports murder. Jose Baez wasn't defending Casey Anthony because he supports the killing of infants. He was there because, well, in his case, I guess he believed in his client's innocence. And even though the public had, condemned her and found her guilty in the court of public opinion. But yes, attorneys are there because they believe in the Constitution and they believe a person's constitutional rights should be protected. And people on Twitter are just going to see the visual and have a gut reaction and say, how dare you do that? How dare you say that? And it's just not right. And I guess, kind of touching on what you said earlier, I guess that goes back to the other opinion of the scrutiny I face. It's like, well, some of it really is completely immaterial because it comes from a place of a misunderstanding.
And so what's your relationship with Jodi Arias now?
Well, I'm no longer Miss Arias' attorney, and so there by and large is no relationship. There need not be one. It's over.
And you plan on I guess you'll never work with her again then?
No. I well, never say never, but I could not conceive of a situation where that would happen. I mean, I would not do so voluntarily.
Right. And so now the whole effect of the case, you came out with your cancer diagnosis. Tell us about that and how it's going now.
Well, I did, and that's probably, if there is a bright side to the lack of anonymity and the publicity, it's a chance to have a bully pulpit to talk about some issues and have people on Twitter follow and understand, or like I said, have the chance for your listeners to hear some of what I have to say in other ways on other topics. And I've told the story in some of my blogs that in August of 2015, late August, I found a growth or an inflammation under my armpit, which was ultimately turned out to be my lymph node. And in September, I had that removed, and it turned out to be cancerous. It turned out that the diagnosis was that I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And one of the reasons I ultimately came out after I had the diagnosis called for six treatments of chemotherapy, and I kept pretty private about it, just telling friends and family because I didn't want people to treat me differently. And so I, kept doing my business. And then in November, around the time of Thanksgiving, I had some test scans that showed that my tumors had basically shrunk or were undetectable. And so I realized that I probably was going to literally make it out alive, so to speak. And so I decided, this is an opportunity for me to come forward and talk about it, because I've heard statistics of, however many people a day are diagnosed with cancer, and I kind of wanted to come out and use whatever stage I had to say, look, you can't take this on. You should take it head on, because I remember some of my initial feelings. I remember some of the denial that I had, thinking, geez, this can't be cancer. I feel too good. I was running, I was working out. I don't know if you're familiar, I'd lost over 75 pounds between the two trials without the benefit of weight loss surgery, by the way. But I moved forward, and I was feeling healthy. I thought, this can't be cancer. I'd done some research online and knew that that's probably what it was. I thought, gosh, I'm feeling so good, this can't be cancer. But I forced myself to go to the doctor. I forced myself to confront it beyond, that initial diagnosis. I forced myself to go through the chemotherapy because I decided that it was worth the fight. And now here I am. We've just entered the month of March, but in January, the end of January, my cancer was determined to be in remission. All issues and restrictions related to my cancer are gone. I'm working out. I'm using my weight loss program. I authored a book on my weight loss program. I'll give a little plug for that. But I'm back doing that. I've lost 75 pounds of what I'm calling my chemo weight, and I'm getting back into shape, and I'm just as healthy as I ever was. So working towards that goal anyway. Well, so to those listeners that are out there who might have got a diagnosis or might know someone who's got a diagnosis, I urge them to listen to what I say and take it on. You can live your life, and you can get past it. You're worth it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And we're glad you took it on, and that things worked out, and that it's true. I think you're right. You got to face these things head on and make the best out of it, and that's a big thing to overcome. Now,
yeah, it really is, but I think everybody's got to decide that fight is worth it for them and them as a person, and if they have that attitude, then I think they can get past it. It's amazing since I came out how much support I had amongst friends and family and strangers, the positive side of social media, I guess. And, how many people that have told me that what I said has helped them. And it's just, in that regard, it's just been such a blessing to come forward publicly.
Oh, yeah. We've all got to support each other. Did it, how do I say, so when this is happening to you, what do you think it is that people don't face up to when you find a lump or when you do something and you're saying this can't be cancer? Do you think it's just a form of denial?
I think so. I think that's the word I use, because when I found this, it was hard for me to believe that it could be cancer, because I was running, I was working out. As a matter of fact, between the time I found it and by the time I could get in to see my doctor, had taken a trip up to Seattle where I still have family and friends, and I was walking several miles a day, going to baseball games, very energetic, no problems at all. And I saw no side effects, no symptoms, if you will. You know, you look online, you see these symptoms, and I saw none of them. And I had the same response when I talked to my doctor. There were no symptoms, but there was cancer because the scan showed there was cancer. And that's the biggest thing. Don't kind of live in that denial, because I easily could have done that. I easily could have said, no way. This is just something that'll go away in a few weeks. And that would have put me a few weeks behind. That would have made my tumors that much bigger. No, you got to go in there. Don't be in denial. And if it's not, great. But if you live in that denial, you're not confronting the cancer as early as possible. And I think any cancer doctor will tell you early detection is the key to victory. So don't be fooled by that denial. Go in and see your doctor.
Yeah, very, very good advice. So, one other thing, speaking of social media, I was thinking, do you realize that there's a free Jodi Arias on Facebook and all that, and there's like 50,000 people following it?
Yeah, I don't follow all of that. I don't keep up. One of the things I talk about in the book is Miss Arias having a personality akin to a cult leader. So a lot of people, follow her and believe in her, and for whatever reasons they have. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. Like we talked earlier about that thirst for knowledge. I remember a few weeks back, I think I was on Nancy Grace. Miss Arias had called a prison guard a derogatory sexual slur, and there was a jail phone call of hers interviewed talking about what she was eating and things of that nature. And the thirst for knowledge was there. And so, yes, it doesn't surprise me that there's all that out there.
Yeah, that's great. But what I don't understand is she admitted to killing him. So what is it that they're hoping for, do you think? Like, there's no doubt that she killed Travis Alexandra.
Well, I don't know. I was asked this question a while back. I did a interview with a Facebook group that was focused on true crimes. And the question was, what do I think of Jodi Arias' supporters? And I said, my response was, I'm not sure what they support. And, I guess I would share your confusion. I'm sure a lot of them, believe that, it was an act of self-defense, and I was such an inept defense attorney that I couldn't prove it, things of that nature. I speculate that on my book, but honestly, I share your confusion.
Oh, okay, good. So it's just not me. I thought maybe I was missing. Well, I thought I was missing something.
No. It's definitely not you. And so I just don't know what to say. Although I attribute that a lot to Miss Arias' abilities, if you will.
Yeah, I just couldn't figure it out because all the write-ups on the page are about all the things Juan Martinez did wrong and that he lied and all this, and it's all free Jodi Arias is the page, and everything's about that, but I just don't get it. I mean, free her, she killed someone and brutally. I'm just confused. But what was the biggest? Well,
you know what I always say too. To my understanding, somebody married Charles Manson within the last year. So, you just never know. People are going to believe what they want to believe and have concepts that they're going to want to hang on to.
What was the biggest surprise in the case for you?
I guess probably, it would be like going back to what I said. That's the fact that it became such a worldwide phenomenon, I think is surprising. Because there's a lot of cases that probably have some similar dynamics that just don't become that. And I think, I remember, hearing from people in Australia and New Zealand and all over the world that were following the case. And I think that became pretty shocking because, I was in this bubble trying to try the case, and to think that people, for example, in Australia, were watching the trial, it's amazing to me. And I hear from people, reasonable people, that would tell me that they were watching the trial and that they followed it every day, and that really is very surprising.
Now, it's over for her, right? Like, she's sentenced to life. I guess that's it now.
Well, she has one appeal, and certainly I can't comment on the viability of her appeal, but she has one guaranteed appeal to the Arizona Court of Appeals, and then no other appeals are automatic. Just
amazing case. Now, what's up for you next?
Well, I am working on the second book. I do not have a time frame. I get a lot on social media, and even these interviews, people ask me, when's that second book coming out? I don't know. The statement I made in the first book was that it would be 2016, and so I've got 9 more months to make good on that, but obviously I was dealing with some cancer-related issues there too. But I'm working on my second book. I have a couple other projects in the works, and now that I am no longer going through chemotherapy, I am working back at my law office, taking on clients, and I'm still, I've got the weight loss book. It's called Trim or More There. It's a silly thing my wife said, and I'm working on losing weight and proving again that the program that I outline in that book is a viable option for people who want to lose weight. I think, along with my cancer diagnosis and my success losing weight in the first place as a healthy individual, weight loss and things like that are certainly always going to be a part of my career moving forward. So,
that's great. That's great. Well, I have to say, thank you very much for taking the time and talking to us about this, and we wish you nothing but the best.
I appreciate it, and I really enjoyed talking to you here today.
I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
You're listening to the House of Mystery on KFNX 1100 AM, Independent Talk Radio. And joining us is the fiery prosecutor who convicted notorious Jodi Arias for the killing of her boyfriend, Travis Alexandra. And he's speaking openly for the first time about his new book, Conviction, The Untold Story of Putting Jodi Arias Behind Bars. Thank you for taking some time for us today.
Well, thank you for asking me to speak with you. I appreciate it.
In your book, you talked about the tactics you utilized in your prosecution of Jodi. What was one of them that sticks out?
I guess from a sort of global perspective, the bigger thing that I put out there is the strategy that I employed during the trial. I knew, for example, that she meaning Jodi Arias, had actually planned, not only premeditated the murder, but planned to kill Travis Alexander. And part of that plan included these gas cans, and they became sort of symbolic in the case. And we all know about them now, but I actually chose to not speak of them in opening statement because I wanted to wait to sort of present them during a cross-examination at a time that they would have the most impact. So during opening statements, I didn't say anything about them, and in fact, I didn't actually even say anything about them during the case in chief that I presented. As I said, I waited until the defense put on their case, as they say, and I waited until the ex-boyfriend was on the witness stand to ask him about whether or not he'd had a conversation with Jodi Arias in the the later part of May, where she requested to borrow 2 gas cans because she was going to be traveling to Mesa, Arizona. And of course, I remember that he sort of gulped when I asked him that. It was a quiet sort of pause, and then he admitted that. But so it's the strategy of when I decided, for example, to use this part of the gas cans. And again, to continue with the threat of the gas, the issue of the gas cans is I also knew, had been able to find out from looking at receipts and following up on that lead, that she actually bought a third gas can and had actually now had a total of three 5-gallon gas cans, a total of 15 gallons. And I was able to determine that as part of her plan, she wanted to travel through Arizona without having to stop for gas. And if you compute it out, you actually can make it through Arizona from California all the way to Nevada if you just have that extra 15 gallons of gas. And so, strategically speaking, I didn't let on about the third gas can either. And I know in the opening statement, defense counsel indicated that, no, it was for the moment that she just called Mr. Alexander and decided to come. And I knew sitting there that was something that I could dispute because I knew about the gas cans. And so, and then lastly, I waited to the very end to ask her about it. And I said, well, if you didn't have this third gas can, why is it that you were filling it up in Salt Lake City? And at that point, that's when she sort of shrugged her shoulders and kind of had that look about her that you caught me kind of thing. And of course, she recovered nicely and said, well, I never was in Salt Lake City. So, and of course, I could show she had been there. So, I mean, it's things like that, the strategy, what I was thinking when I was presenting the evidence.
Your prosecution strategy was quite bullish, and some people really liked the way you performed, and some people didn't.
Yeah, some people really, I mean, the bigger criticism that I got was that during the cross-examination of some of the witnesses, and specifically her, that I was a bit too strident and maybe, was a bit too strong in the way that I questioned her. But with her, had I not employed that tactic, and that's what it was part of the strategy, she would have controlled the questioning, and I would have not, and it would have been just a situation where she would have given me the same story that she'd been telling all along about how he had attacked her, and somehow there was some sort of this sexual abuse component to the domestic violence that she was claiming. So I needed to get straight answers, and so when I said, is that yes or no, people sort of decided that perhaps that was a bit too harsh. But yes, there was some criticism about it.
Yeah, I think you sort of had to. She was not the normal sort of gal that she appeared to be. She was quite a smart girl and very manipulative, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's one thing about her. She sat there and she had the librarian look about her. She had that whole thing going, but underneath it, as you step back, one of the things that you can do is you can underestimate the person that's on the other side. In this case, Jodi Arias. I'm never going to be a person who's going to say that she wasn't extremely well prepared for what she did, and she was very thorough in her preparations, going to such lengths as when the police are out at the crime scene, she's calling in as the ex-girlfriend, pretending that she doesn't know anything about it. I mean, she was extremely manipulative. She would take something that you knew was not true and spin it in such a way that you almost believed her. So I never underestimated her, and as I sit here today, I believe she's intelligent, and I believe she knew everything that she was doing, and the planning, it was incredible, and that is meant in. Although it sounds like I'm being positive in my remarks about her, one can't help but say it was very well planned.
Yeah, she was very good at it. I remember her throwing things at you about your posture and your stance, sort of throwing her off so she couldn't remember, Right, and that was part of the strategy, because then it would. She was trying to make me look like I was a bully, and that I was again like Travis, that I was trying to attack her. But the jury saw their way through it and saw that that was just sort of a strategy on her part in an effort or an attempt not to answer the questions. Yeah, I still think it's quite amazing to be able to hold your composure like she did, knowing that you're on trial for a murder that there's a lot of evidence.
There was, and she never lost her composure except for that one time when I asked her about the gas cans. Throughout the whole thing, if she was grasping for an answer, what she would do is she would say, well, I can't remember, or I'm in a fog, or she would take issue with the word, for example. Do you have a mental issue, or do you have a mental problem or something? She would say, well, I don't like the word issue. Okay, how about the word problem? Well, I don't like that. Well, I like that word. So she would play word games up there when she would sort of be grasping for an answer until she bought time so that she could effectively answer the question, so that at least she would give a rendition that, again, there was something to it, and you'd have to always sort of be very careful.
Now, losing the death penalty must have been kind of hard. I know a lot of Americans were frustrated by that.
With regard to any sentence, and specifically the sentence in this case, I never look back, and I never concern myself or worry about what a jury may have done or what a judge may have done in terms of the sentence. I actually, as soon as it's pronounced, I leave it there and I move on. Other than that, it would make my life miserable. I would be living in the past, and fortunately, and maybe that's why I still am working there and working at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and why I will continue to work there for some time, is that I live in the present and I look to the future. So as soon as they pronounce the sentence, I moved on, and our legal system is the best in the world, and I'm happy to work in it.
And finally, what was the reason for you to write the book?
And one of the things that we've been talking about here is that how well she planned it, and how she had all these stories, and how on the witness stand she came across sort of wayfish, and the stories almost seem believable. And in my view, there's a lesson to be learned here, that no matter how well you plan something, no matter how smart you really are or you think you are, you're not going to get away with it. This is not something that she should have gotten away with, and as we've seen, in the sort of the trial, high-profile trials that are out there, there have been some very high-profile acquittals. My view in putting this book out is to say you can't get away with murder. Perhaps others may have. I don't know. I know there have been some high-profile acquittals. At least not in this case. You can't get away with murder.
Our guest, Juan Martinez, prosecutor and author, the book Conviction, The Untold Story of Putting Jodi Arias Behind Bars. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.